What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with another pod. What's going on in pop culture right now? We gotta talk about Madam Web. Everyone's talking about it, not for good reasons. We'll get into that. Also going to talk about Bob Marley One Love, the new Bob Marley biopic film surprise hit of this weekend. True Detective Season 4 wrapped up on HBO. Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 3, the final season, has begun on Disney+. And also SSERAFIM dropped a new album, Easy. So make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod. See links below. See the best of 2024 Spotify playlist for my favorite songs of the year, updated every week. Let me know it's good, and let's get into it. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of SSERAFIM's third EP/third mini album, Easy. SSERAFIM back since their debut album, Unforgiven, last year, and most recently their first English single, Perfect Night, which became a pretty big hit for them. And I've been a huge fan of SSERAFIM ever since that 2022 debut, just because I think they're like a really engaging new K-pop group, and I think they're just really exciting. There's a lot of personality in these members. I think there's a lot of fun vocal talent, and just the songs that, Hybe, Source Music, and SSERAFIM are in the mix to make all the time, I think are really cool. They make a lot of big songs, but also are not afraid to jump around genre. Especially on that Unforgiven album last year, they are dabbling in different types of sounds, and I think they're a talented enough group that they can really pull that off. And I think this is quite exciting, obviously. And Easy, unfortunately, I have to say, I was let down by this EP as a fan of the group. I think this is pretty easily their least interesting release that they've put out. I think the biggest sin of all is that this is a project that really kind of stamps down on the personality of all the individual members of SSERAFIM. You think of someone like Chaewon or Yeonjun, they are big idols, like very talented. They can do a lot of things, but vocally on Easy, a lot of times you don't even know who's singing because it's really understated and kind of stripped back. And I think the biggest culprit of this would be the title track, Easy, ostensibly the biggest song on the project. But with Easy, it's really hard to tell who is singing those notes. I think this is just kind of a basic trap beat with a lot of bland verses. The auto-tune dubbing that they do on all the members' vocals just really makes it sound more anonymous than it should, because this is not a group that usually sounds anonymous. They have so much personality and presence on the mic usually. I was really surprised. I think the Damn I Really Make It Look Easy hook from Chaewon, it's easily like the best like vocal moment on the song. It's like one of the best lines. That's cool. But like everything else about the song, it's just too understated, man. It just doesn't pop like some of their other bigger songs do. And I think overall, Chaewon, Yeonjun have like the best lines, but it's not saying much. Like this is a song that I feel like really kind of reins in the girls. Like it really like prevents them from shining the way they usually do pretty effortlessly. So yeah, Easy as a title track, I was pretty surprised by. The EP starts off with this, intro track called Good Bones, which is kind of inspired by this Maggie Smith poem, reportedly. And it definitely gives you the vibe of a poem. It's all the members kind of going through these kind of like affirmations, in various languages, Korean, English, Japanese. And they kind of all flock to the same refrain. Easy, crazy, hot, I can make it, and they kind of like screech it out, and it's telling you or suggesting that there's going to be like a bit of like passion and like maybe like emo nature to it in some way, because there's guitar and drums all throughout Good Bones, but it really just kind of fades away once you get into the actual like songs you're going to revisit on the release. SSERAFIM, they're a group that often have really impressive B-sides, songs that people really like. Think of songs like Sour Grapes or Blue Flame or Impurities or No Celestial. Like they don't, get lazy with the B-sides. And I think actually the B-sides, once again, probably shine the most on this Easy album here. The song Swan Song, the drums immediately are just more a beat than the Easy title track, and the singing just stands out more, I think partially because those vocal effects just aren't present. The song Smart, I also thought was vocally pretty fun. You hear some horns for the first time on the release, kind of reminiscent of how No Celestial had some horns. Also the production, again, kind of dabbling in some other genres. I think this one kind of taking a bit of like an Afrobeat inspiration, which again, is a nice callback to what they did on Unforgiven with the song Fire in the Belly, which definitely had kind of like a Latin pop flair to it. The last song, We Got So Much, also stands out just for being a bit more upbeat. So I think like these B-sides will probably grab people that are fans of the group, and especially when you compare them to other B-sides of their past. But I think like the big flashy song, the title track Easy, is kind of easily, unfortunately, their weakest title track to date. And, that's a high bar to clear. They got some big bangers, right, with Fearless and Anti-Fragile and Unforgiven and Perfect Night. Like, these are some, big songs, big singles, big flashy songs. So it's clearly not what they were going for. It's a change. But to me, this change, I think, just doesn't quite grab you the same way. And I think because of some of those production choices with those vocal effects, I just don't think it stands out enough for something that's supposed to be a little bit subtler. So yeah, this is a letdown for me, I have to say. I'm sure they're going to release something again towards the end of the year. That's kind of the MO with Hybe these days. Lots of EP drops, lots of single drops. So, I mean, Perfect Night was a sponsored song with Overwatch and Blizzard, and that ends up becoming a huge hit for them and a really big entry point as their first English song. So they can clearly achieve great heights with seemingly simple, artistic releases, such as just one-off song that's sponsored with Perfect Night. So I think they'll bounce back from Easy, no problem. I'm not worried about it or anything like that. But just a bit let down that this is kind of their new release going into an upcoming world tour this year. It just feels a bit more muted than it should be. But of course, they have a pretty fun catalog already as a group that's less than 2 years old. So I think they'll be just fine on tour. But yeah, let me know. What did you think about Easy? Are you a bit let down by its kind of understated nature? Did you find more things to like? For more K-pop reviews, more music reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 3. The final season of The Bad Batch is upon us. 3-episode premiere out now on Disney+. The series will be wrapping up a 15-episode final season, giving us a finale on May 1st. So a long runway ahead of us as we spend one last go around with The Batch. And I have to say, between this 3-episode premiere, what we've seen in the trailer, as well as what other critics have seen through seeing the first half of the season, it sounds like The Bad Batch is going to do what we wanted and tell a more serialized story as this journey we've been on with The Bad Batch wraps up. And I think that's very exciting because ultimately The Bad Batch is a show that, despite being enjoyable as a pseudo continuation of Star Wars The Clone Wars and just kind of giving us lore elements for the hardcore fans, as they come, despite all of that, The Bad Batch hasn't really gone through a lot of character growth, and ultimately from a plot perspective has largely been unsurprisingly constrained in this Rise of the Empire timeline that of course we all know so well as Star Wars fans. So the show always felt like it was smaller stakes and really just kind of there as a good hang for those of us that are really into the whole thing, as Clone Wars fans, Bad Batch fans, etc. And it sounds like we're going to get more serialized. We're going to have a lot more progression with our core Batch characters. Seems like Omega and Crosshair are going to be a pair with this season, and I'm excited about that because I think where Crosshair has gone, arguably the biggest character arc on the show, and of course the Omega character has been so central. I'm looking forward to some payoff there. And of course the trailer has teased a very tantalizing thing, of course the reintroduction of Asajj Ventress, who we assumed had died in the Dark Disciple novel, which was a, repurposing of a Clone Wars script that didn't get produced when Clone Wars was originally canceled. Ventress coming back, very tantalizing, especially something so monumental to happen on The Bad Batch. Very cool. Of course, in this premiere, we got to see Palpatine. Always fun to spend time with him. Confirm that, Hemlock's plan, Project Necromancer, seemingly going to do a lot of fun lore elements for us, tying together the Emperor's pursuit of cloning, seemingly, kind of obvious nod to stuff we've seen explored in The Mandalorian, as well as, of course, the sequel trilogy, The Rise of Skywalker, etc. So Definitely cleaning some stuff up there, contextualizing some things, always a good time with that. Really, I'm hoping the character payoff is satisfying. Of course, the loss of Tech in the season 2 finale, you hope continues to weigh on those characters. So I'm feeling pretty good about where this show is going to go, and it sounds like they're going to go big, but also stay largely focused, and even if there's going to be one-off episodes or one-off arcs, it seems like we're all kind of barreling down this path towards, Tantus and Hemlock's schemes and whatnot. So I'm pretty into where we're at, and I feel like it's all kind of coming to a satisfying place. I'm hoping we see more of Commander Cody this season. Of course, his defection status was suggested, shown in a sense in season 2, and in general, kind of the fate of the clones as the Empire moved away from the clones. Some of the best material in season 2. I really hope some of that stuff can remain in season 3, and it's not just hardcore plot. We'll see about that. Yeah, I mean, episode 2, I enjoyed the nice nod. I mean, it seemed like it was Black Sun, the very first scene, the syndicate that Wrecker and Hunter go to, but like it was a Deveronian guy, not a Prince Zizor type, so I wasn't really sure, but that's where my mind went. Cool to see those clone kids, interesting introduction there, and like a Kraken monster at the end. It seemed to get a lot of monsters, a lot of creatures this season, as the batches want to do. But episode 1 I thought was pretty effective start because it was really Omega only, and then Omega and Crosshair escaping so quickly at the end of episode 3, kind of unexpected. But yeah, I'm a fan of the Bad Batch. I don't think I have high expectations for where season 3 can take us, but it just feels like it's going to wrap itself up in a satisfying way as you can. This has never been a show for anyone beyond those who already enjoyed Clone Wars. And of course, this would not be the first place you would begin if maybe you were interested in Clone Wars or dare I say Rebels, of course, the great Star Wars Rebels. So like, again, it's really like a show for some lore, for some hangs, for the people that are really in the weeds, like the hardcore heads. And that's not going to change with season 3. Moving forward, we hope Star Wars Animation can give us another season of Tales of the Jedi. That's been hinted at by Dave Filoni. I wouldn't be shocked about that. But then in terms of an ongoing animated series, I'm very curious where we go there. Will we perhaps get our first High Republic animated series as the Acolyte takes us there in live action? The comics and novels have been there for some time. That would be cool. Of course, anything beyond the general Rise of the Empire original trilogy prequel timeline that we know so well, of course, would be very welcome. All Star Wars fans agree about that. But yeah, we'll see about that. In the meantime, Bad Batch season 3, very happy to be on one final journey with the squad. Let me know, what are you most looking forward to seeing in Bad Batch season 3? And for more TV reviews, more Star Wars, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of True Detective season 4, aka True Detective Night Country. The series is out. I'm going to talk about the finale as well as the series as a whole and kind of relate it back to the previous True Detective seasons. Of course, True Detective, now a long-running anthology crime series grounded as a cop series. And True Detective season 4 kind of immediately stood out for the first time, grounding the True Detective storytelling in the eyes of women, in this case, 2 police officers, again, played by Jodie Foster as Chief Danvers and Callie Reese as Trooper Navarro. And yeah, I think this is a pretty engaging season of True Detective. There's been a lot of talk online, I think some of it kind of frustratingly, about comparing True Detective to past seasons and some frustrations people have felt about how it's differed from the past, which I don't really understand given that the show is an anthology. I mean, even Nick Pizzolatto himself, the creator of the series, who was not involved with season 4, he took some kind of shots at Issa Lopez, the creator of Night Country, which I thought was a bit off base. That being said, the Night Country story and then the True Detective bones, the True Detective IP, I don't want to say they're in conflict throughout season 4, but they can definitely kind of brush up against each other. Night Country was conceived on its own, and then HBO kind of pitched it, helped mold it into a True Detective story, using that IP to help get the show off the ground. It does make some sense. But, hard detective work, quote unquote, not really the MO of True Detective season 4. And to me, I didn't really mind because I was quite engaged by Danvers and Navarro. I thought Jodie Foster really giving you the movie star performance for a movie star part. And Callie Reese, who I'd not really seen act too much, I think really got to blossom as Navarro, as the Navarro character went on her journey throughout the series. And the way True Detective Season 4 begins, it's kind of like a soft fake out of what the show's priorities are going to be, where you think it's going to be about investigating the Salal lab scientists and how they all died out in the ice and what was going on with that. But really, it was more about the Annie K murder, and even more specifically, this was, I think, a show about the individuals and kind of the journeys they're on, as they're all broken people with a lot of personal baggage, a lot of personal demons, and how that kind of contrasts with the general vibe of Ennis, Alaska, which is a place where a lot of people openly believe has some kind of supernatural element to it, has spirits just kind of in and around the community. And of course, the local Inuit, indigenous community is a big part of that, and I think towards the end of the season, the last 2 episodes where it's kind of revealed the conspiracy aspect of what's going on, where the mine had been intensely polluting the land, and the lab had been covering that up because the pollution was actually kind of serving the lab's research interests. And of course, this was to the great detriment of the community and really infecting the indigenous community the most in terms of causing stillborn births and cancers and just obviously poor public health. And of course, Pryor's dad, as a corrupt cop, was involved in some of this cover up. I think, a lot of that kind of core plot, determining what happened, where is Raymond Clark, who actually killed Annie K. All those things I wasn't as super dying to get uncovered, because I was more interested in kind of just how the characters were reacting to everything and keeping their lives together, or lack thereof. Of course, young Pryor as well goes on quite the journey, literally killing his dad and then covering up his death. And I think some pieces of the series probably work better than others, like Christopher Eccleston, who I always enjoy, of course, amazing on The Leftovers. He doesn't have a whole lot to really do on the series as Danvers' superior. I guess the suggestion that he may be in and aware of the cover-up is probably the most interesting thing about him, but it's never really explored too much. Also, Fiona Shaw's character, it's kind of this loner widow. I feel like there was more on the bone there, kind of a waste of Fiona Shaw. She's not really in the series all too much. Early on, I was kind of a bit frustrated with a lot of the time spent with Navarro's sister. But I guess once she meets her fate and Navarro's journey starts to really move forward, I think it made a lot more sense in how the series worked. I did appreciate in the finale that when Danvers is being softly interrogated about what had happened by other officers, it's very much framed just exactly how True Detective Season 1's present day scenes were framed, in terms of how they framed Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey, So that's a nice callback. Of course, Raymond Clark gives the biggest callback of all, dropping the time as a flat circle line to Danvers and Navarro. I think this stuff with the Wheeler cover up, it's not really. I don't think there wasn't a whole lot really to it until all of a sudden Eccleston is hey, I know, just so you know, and then it's kind of juxtaposed where Pryor has to do basically his own version of it. So ultimately, I think some of the beats are more satisfying than others. I did kind of like the revelation of what really happened to the Salal men, and how Navarro and Danvers learn about that from the other indigenous women when they kind of just tell them it matter-of-factly. That was pretty satisfying. I think some of the other stuff in terms of trying to all the time spent trying to get to the ice cave, learning what the night country is, some of the overt ghost demon stuff. It's I could take or leave some of that. I think it just kind of was a bit slow. Although I did really enjoy when Navarro sees the one Salal guy in the hospital before he dies, and he's completely possessed, right out of a horror movie. And the ending I think fits everything, right? Where it's very ambiguous. Navarro's fate, whether she is in fact actually alive or her spirit is just visiting Danvers. I actually really like that ending. I like how a lot of stuff isn't super clear, but the emotional journeys are the stuff that actually is I think the most satisfying, the most clear. So I think ultimately this is going to be more polarizing in terms of how the plot is progressed and plot is resolved. But because that wasn't the primary focus of the series, I'm pretty into this one overall. I would say this is in line with True Detective Season 3. Certainly has some cool differences too. I think I'd probably actually take this above True Detective Season 3, but of course Season 1 still being the best of the series. I'm hopeful for True Detective to continue to return as an anthology series. We've seen with Fargo on FX that the anthology format is a great way for creators to have fun and take chances and find interesting ways to tell dramatic stories in the loose definition of IP having that safety net for getting the show made. So yeah, we should continue to root for True Detective to exist. I think it's a pretty safe investment for HBO. And season 4 actually is the highest rated version of the season of the series, just edging past season 1 in terms of viewership, which is very impressive. So yeah, True Detective season 4, True Detective Night Country. I think it was a really fun spin. I was really happy that it wasn't just kind of playing the old hits again or trying to be a facsimile of a past season. It's truly getting into the anthology format. And to compare it to Fargo, I think this still had enough DNA of True Detective to feel fun, whereas Fargo season 4, for example, famously took a lot of diversions and ultimately didn't pay off to the right degree. So yeah, True Detective season 4, let me know what you thought of it, and for more TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Bob Marley One Love, the latest musical biopic film starring Kingsley Ben-Adir as Bob Marley and Lashana Lynch as Rita Marley. This film is directed by Ronaldo Marcus Green, his follow-up to King Richard from a few years back. And of course, this continues a consistent trend in the film-going world, which of course is the musical biopic film, a familiar format for movies, and also a pretty generally fruitful and popular one, as evidenced by many hit musical biopics of recent years, such as Bohemian Rhapsody and Rocket Man and Elvis, and Bob Marley One Love really exceeded those box office expectations this past weekend. So kind of continuing that trend. And it makes a lot of sense because, of course, Bob Marley is a music icon with a lot of fans, really generations of fans at this point. So his life is, of course, ripe for the music biopic treatment. Unfortunately, Bob Marley One Love is a lackluster and disappointing biopic, despite the magnitude of Bob Marley's life as a cultural icon, as a music trailblazer, as a political force through his music and his message. Really, none of that is captured in an effective way in the film Bob Marley One Love. The film is very surface level, it's very trite, and frankly, it just doesn't get deep enough into any of the things Bob Marley represented, nor any of the personal aspects to Marley, his wife, or his band as well. It really doesn't spend any time getting into any of the various options you have in terms of trying to tell something meaningful, despite the fact that this movie is largely only focused on a handful of years in the late 70s, as Bob's early 30s progressing to his late 30s, when of course he tragically passes young at age 36 from cancer. Bob Marley One Love wastes, I think, a lot of time with these kind of flashback scenes, these memory scenes where we see a child Bob as well as a teenage Bob when he's first starting out with his band, the Wailers. But it just feels like it's like taking time away from spending any time with adult Bob, played by Kingsley Ben-Adir, and we're just not getting anywhere. And to me, it's a big shame because Kingsley Ben-Adir, he is a great actor. I've been very interested in him ever since, of course, the big breakout a few years back when he played Malcolm X in One Night in Miami. Tremendous actor. Marvel, of course, wasted him with Secret Invasion, but he's a great actor, and he does a great job as Bob Marley. And Lashana Lynch does a good job with the material she's giving as Rita. It's not nothing to do with the acting. There's really just a problem with the script. Kingsley Ben-Adir really imbuing, I think, the mannerisms and the energy and the performance tics that Bob had on stage, but also I think really genuinely commanding the screen with the way Bob spoke, really giving you that Jamaican patois. It doesn't feel like a ripoff or a joke in any way. I think it comes across quite genuine and comes across quite well. And he's really rocking the dreads, I believe, via wig. And I think he's really kind of great as Bob. The problem is like they just don't get into much, like the message of Bob and how that perhaps could relate to Rastafari culture, Jamaican politics, the wisdom of Marcus Garvey, the Haile Selassie. All these things are briefly referenced but never touched on in Bob Marley One Love. And to me, that's just disappointing because this was a story that had a lot of room to go in a lot of different directions. And they decided to go right down the middle. They even nod at like infidelity, but they don't go anywhere with that. you know, they just don't spend any time with it. Thankfully, there is many Bob Marley songs in this because the Bob Marley estate was involved with the creation of this biopic. You have to imagine creatively they might have directed some things away from where the writers maybe want to go to get more invested in things. Nonetheless, you have all the songs, but they're kind of used as like crutches where they'll be talking about like the sentiment of a song, like characters will be speaking about it. Next thing you know, we'll be hearing those lyrics like in the very next sentence as a performance comes up. So it's fun to be with the songs. I think it's fun to be with performers, but I was definitely let down because I just think there was so much more meat on this bone, and maybe even if we had just not spent so much time with these kind of shallow flashback scenes and just spent more time in the present, which of course, again, like the late 70s during the later years of Bob Marley's life, would have been interesting because like he's just kind of an icon. He's just kind of a like massive superstar musically, and the Jamaican people just kind of love him. But like we don't really know why because it's never like shown to us. It's only told to us as the movie progresses. So I was entertained by the things that are good about this movie, but really just kind of let down by the general structure and script issues that Bob Marley One Love has. So, yeah, I mean, I'm happy the movie did good. I'm not like tired of musical biopic films. I enjoy them, and I think, I'm not even like a huge reggae fan per se. Like I don't even know too many of Bob Marley songs beyond the big hits. I was still very interested in this story. We'll of course be getting a lot of musical biopic talk coming soon. Of course, the Amy Winehouse movie comes out in May, and then Antoine Fuqua's Michael Jackson biopic comes out next year, which I think a lot of people have reservations about. So more to come. But yeah, Bob Marley One Love, disappointing, honestly. Disappointing for just not being as great as it could have been. And I think this was a story, this was a subject that definitely had that potential, and we should probably spend more time with the Bob Marley documentaries that are out there, some of the other reggae films that are out there, because this really just doesn't delve too deep. But yeah, let me know, how did you feel about Bob Marley One Love? Did you like it more than me? Were you able to ignore some of those obvious faults and still enjoy the movie? Let me know. What's your favorite Bob song? And for more movie reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up, welcome to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Madam Web, the latest Sony superhero film from S.J. Clarkson. Of course, Sony making their Spider-Man adjacent superhero movies due to their hold on the Spider-Man film rights. Madam Web following in the footsteps of the two Venom films, as well as Morbius. And yeah, Madam Web is a huge dud. The best thing about Madam Web was the press tour we just had featuring star Dakota Johnson really just not giving a F, playing into the joke. The meme that we had from one of the lines in the trailer that was just horribly written and expository. That line is not even in the movie. Something else that's not in this movie would be watching Sydney Sweeney, Isabella Merced, and Celeste O'Connor actually play the Spider-Woman that we know they will be playing as hinted in at the trailer. If you've seen them in the trailer as their various Spider-Women selves, that's all you see. That is the only time we see them in this movie. This is a horribly written, uninteresting, incoherent at times, and just kind of bland origin story to very obscure superhero characters in the Spider-Man adjacent world. This movie is so ill-conceived and just has really nothing inspiring about it. There's really nothing to recommend about it, and it really feels like a superhero movie that would have came out 10, 15 years ago. And somehow, Sony is going to be the one feeding the streets with superhero movies in 2024. Madam Web will be followed up by Kraven the Hunter and Venom 3. Whereas Marvel Studios is just dropping Deadpool and Wolverine, and DC is just dropping Joker 2. I would not be shocked if Sony recalibrates how they treat the Spider-Man adjacent world following this year. Just because, like, it's not like Kraven the Hunter looks too good either, and Venom 2 was pretty darn bad, even if both those movies are pretty successful. So the whole Sony project, and whether we're eventually building up to a Sinister Six movie that may or may not ever feature Spider-Man, played by Tom Holland or someone else, I don't know. The Sony project remains weird, but it's not even Morbin time. Like, there's nothing, like, fun and dumb about Morbius the way the internet created in the aftermath of Morbius, which of course also was a huge dud in its own right. So Madam Web, like, I think the whole conception of this character, the Madam Web character, Cassandra Webb, played by Dakota Johnson, is just such like a B, C-list character in the Spider-Man overview that, like, you would have to have a really inspired take, I think, to make a movie people want to care about. And the way they portray Webb's precog, seeing the future, seeing the past, visionary powers, it's very incoherent, it's hard to follow, it's very visually uninteresting as a film. And the whole plot of this movie really just involves Webb, as well as the, three young girls, Sweeney, O'Connor, and Merced's characters, watching all of them. They're basically just running and fleeing from Tahar Rahim's villain character. There's really not a lot of action to this movie, and it's kind of just a lot of fleeing and running, and it's truly like the very beginnings of an origin story. Obviously, it's easy in hindsight to look back and say, Sony, you just had a huge hit with Sydney Sweeney and Anyone But You, of course, the highest grossing romantic comedy film of the pandemic era, a movie I liked quite a bit. Why didn't you just make a Spider-Woman movie with Sydney Sweeney versus try and set it up with this movie first? Obviously, there's plenty of hindsight, but yeah, it just doesn't come across well. Sweeney will be fine. Isabella Merced should be fine too. She gets a redo with superhero movies, playing Hawkgirl in the new DC universe, and also will be on The Last of Us season 2. So I think her career continues apace as well. Been a fan of hers since Sicario. And Celeste O'Connor, I didn't know too much about, but I liked her in this movie as well. She was pretty fun. Adam Scott in this movie, who was introduced as Cassandra Webb's paramedic co-worker, that's Ben Parker, aka Uncle Ben. And we're watching Emma Roberts be pregnant in this movie, and she's giving birth to Peter Parker. Didn't see that one coming. Shout out to Sony, really threading our needle with that one. In terms of the movie just kind of being like really ill-conceived and ill-produced, though, Tahar Rahim's villain character, who I didn't even comprehend the villain's name, Ezekiel. Ezekiel's whole performance by Rahim is clearly like all ADR. Like, they redid all the dialogue. It sounds really kind of artificial and distorted, and I think they just kind of re-recorded all new lines after they filmed this, and it comes across horribly. Like, he makes no impression at all. He's the most one-note, one-dimensional villain you could ever get in a franchise movie like this. And I like Tahar Rahim. He's a great actor. He was good in Napoleon. He was good in The Mauritanian. Like, he's good, but like, he has nothing with the script gives him any opportunity to save himself. Like, he just doesn't acquit himself well at all. Dakota Johnson, also someone I like when the role is right. The Lost Daughter, Cha-Cha Real Smooth. She's a good actor. She has good comedic timing. I think the stuff in the baby shower in Madam Web is actually pretty funny on Johnson's part. But she's really just kind of sleepwalking through this movie. A lot of wooden line readings. Again, the action is so uninteresting. There's really just nothing to rally around with Madam Web. Again, it really feels like a relic of the pre-MCU modern-day superhero storytelling mode, and this is a troubling trend that we continue to get with the Sony films following Venom 2, following Morbius, and who knows, maybe Kraven as well. So, yeah, this movie's just a big dud. Honestly, tough L for S.J. Clarkson, who at one point was attached to make Star Trek 4. This is her first big movie role after being an accomplished TV creator for some time. And yeah, this does not reflect fondly on her. Also, this movie's not even going to do well at the box office, unsurprisingly. C+ cinema score, which is the biggest failing grade you can get from a franchise movie with that metric. Box office is like 20-something million over a 6-day extended opening, after premiering on Valentine's Day. There's really nothing good going on with this. Also, one very specific note I have to say is there's a moment where Cassandra Webb, is buying a ticket at Grand Central in New York City to go north to Poughkeepsie for a funeral. And the train she rides on, which is the train you see in the trailer, that train is supposed to be an MTA line, the Hudson line, going north, a train line I've ridden countless times in my life. And the train is just not accurate. Like the interior with those seats and everything, that is just not accurate to what those trains are. And that immediately stood out to me as someone who has ridden on that train before. Obviously, that's not a real criticism of the film, of course. There's plenty of real ones to make, but it just stood out to me. Also, another classic example in this movie of Cassandra Webb, a paramedic working in New York City, somehow has this immaculate, massive apartment studio or one bed that she lives in by herself. It's like just the affordability of that seems very incongruous to her actual character's job. Either way, this movie is just a big old dud. There's really nothing to recommend about it. It is not Morbin time. And I don't think we're getting a sequel. I don't think we're going to see Madam Web as a character again. Maybe the Sydney Sweeney Spider-Woman comes back around. We'll see. But let me know. What did you think of Madam Web? Did you have anything you liked about it? Because I didn't really have much to latch on to. And for more movie reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. All right, that's going to do it for the pod this week. Next week, we have a mega pod, one of the biggest pods of the year, almost surely. Let's get into Avatar: The Last Airbender. The live-action remake on Netflix is finally here. We got to get into that. Netflix, Drive to Survive, season 6? Season 5? Whichever season it is, we got to get into that. Also, Drive-Away Dolls, the new film from Ethan Coen, got to get into that. Lulu Wang's Expats is wrapping up on Amazon Prime Video. Vim Vender's Perfect Days is finally out. Oh yeah, and some music. We got Twice, Eric the Architect from Flatbush Zombies, and MGMT back after several years. Very exciting. A lot of big things to get into. Make sure you subscribe. YouTube.com/nostalgiapod. Linktree.com/nostalgiapod. Get the pod any way you can. See links below. Get the Spotify playlist. Let me know it's good. And I'll see you next week.